Hello, students. Professor Stevenson here. Happy Sunday. I always feel very happy to record these. Like I made it through another work week. So awesome. Yeah. So before I get to the discussions, I want to preview what's happening next week. Next week, there's obviously readings and a discussion for week 5. Or not what's happening next week, but the additional thing that I'm asking you to do next week is to sign up for individual conferences for the annotated bibliography project. And so those conferences, what I have done, and I don't know if this will work out because I don't know if our schedules will coincide. I have blocked out 4:30 to 8 o'clock Monday night and Tuesday night of the following week, so week 6, February 18th and 19th. Just like the discussion leader signups, it's on a Sign Up Genius. So what I'm asking you to do is sign up for a half an hour time. If you get there and you see that both of those nights you cannot make the half an hour at all, pop open an email and send me an email. My hope is that you all, cross your fingers, could make that half hour. If you can't, like maybe one of you are teaching a class at that time and it's just something that you can't get out of, then pop open an email and you and I will figure out an alternative time. I am, without ruining your entire life that week, I am suggesting that if at all possible, you try to get into one of those half an hour slots just so that it's easier on all of us. But if you can't, we'll work on it. Okay. So again, that's for the following week, but I'd like you to sign up for those by the end of this week. I'd like us to have our week planned out. So whether you can make the time or you can't. And so what you'll want to be thinking about before your meeting with me is what you want to do for your annotated bibliography project. Some of you are kind of looking at your own. I can already kind of tell that there's themes that are coming out in the discussion boards that you're looking at, or I've even, in the grading comments, I've even maybe suggested avenues for you to take based on something interesting you posted or something that you found intriguing. And so that would be a great opportunity for you to dig deeper. If you look at the assignment sheet for the discussion board, or not the annotated bibliography, you'll see the details of the project and what it really, if none of you assign annotated bibliographies in your class, it's a pretty popular writing assignment. Obviously at the undergraduate level or at the high school level, one of our goals is teaching students how to do research, so it's a really great way to get them to be inquisitive about stuff, and then also it's a really good way to teach them citation and stuff. At the graduate level, it's a really good way for you as a student to read a bunch of stuff and kind of take it in a specific area. I know that as a graduate student, that was one of my favorite genres in a class that I wasn't comfortable with the subject in, because it really let me kind of explore areas, and it felt a little bit more lower stakes than like a hardcore term paper where you're like making a clear argument. And so that's really the case, is I want you all, obviously within the boundaries of composition theory, composition pedagogy, I want you all to explore an area that ideally is something that you're interested in, and I want you to explore it in a way that is meaningful and fruitful to you. And so where we're at in talking the following week in week 6 is you're kind of pitching me your idea. So what I would do to prepare for that is read around, like, is this a thing? Like maybe you're not as associated with sort of the tent posts of the field which are actually pretty big anyway. But maybe you're like, wow, I was really wondering if this is a thing. So you get on the library's database and you start looking at scholarly journal articles. The big journals in composition studies, and maybe that's something that I can work on posting a resource for early in the week. The 4Cs journal, composition studies, there's a journal of basic writing, there's Rhetoric Review, which is a more like rhetoric-y journal, but and then let me get a more complete list of it. But honestly, the 4Cs journal would really give you, and composition studies would really give you a good idea about what's out there. So even if you're lost, what I would do is I would start perusing the table of contents of those journals and see if anything piques your interest. If anything that we've already done piques your interest, maybe start going down like a research rabbit hole, like if the Burns or the Broof article really kind of piqued your interest, awesome. Now's the time to maybe like go see who else is citing that article and seeing what they're doing. So anyway, that is my not so brief get to thinking about this, and I'll post a list of journals in the field later on this or early in the week. So awesome. So this week, great questions again. Thank you so much for asking questions that get us to think both about the theory and the pedagogy. So kind of combining both of those things, asking questions that can fold in the people in our class who haven't taught, and to the people who are new teachers and some of you who have been teaching for a really long time. I think that's one of the strengths in our class is that I can see you all learning from each other. So that's great. So let's get into it. Anthony talked about when we should start thinking about an error-based approach in education, and he said it should be more bolstering of error-based approaches in the K through 12 system, and that in college it seems patronizing to do this. So this is actually one of the quandaries of basic writing. Most of you all who have teaching experience in the K through 12 system. This based on where you were educated, how you were educated, right? Like busing and stuff like that plays a huge, where you live, where you were educated, and how rich your school system is or not can play a huge role in the type of education you're given, not to mention parent involvement and stuff like that. So by the time students get to me in first year writing, there's such a variety of experiences, even with students who have placed out of a basic writing class. So it's so difficult to think, and I don't know that there's an answer here, but it's the error-free, my assumption is that students have come with a lot of grammar instruction because that's what elementary and secondary ed does a lot of, much more than I do because I do zero. So that's part of my pedagogy, is that by the time students come to me, they either kind of have internalized grammatical structures or know where to look for the rules, and that we're really working on rhetoric and structure and stuff like that in the writing, genre and things like that. So students who need extra help have to figure out where to find that. So that's on them. And that disproportionately affects the students who need it most. At the same time, one of the things we'll get to when we talk about second language writing is that some of the grammar stuff, research is finding that as many times as I put, you need a comma here on student paper, the way that kind of mentally and transfer works is that they don't internalize that right away, it takes them a long time. So that we're asking students to practice it. And so, Anthony, I don't have a great answer for you, but I know that, um, you know, that there's a lot of systemic problems before students get to me. And so even uneven grammar instruction or and students get to me, I wouldn't say that students get to me and they don't know anything. It's that they haven't properly practiced it. And so they just don't know. And then students also get to me and think that grammar is English and grammar is writing, and we kind of have to shake that out. Like, no, it's not. So that was a really long way to say it. I don't know, but it would be good to figure this out a little bit better. It's a conversation that our field's been obviously having for a very long time. And I think we need to bring in more voices, more K through 12 educators to this field who can kind of speak to the longevity of the educational project. Collaboration, Erin had some really great things to say about military collaboration. You'll get there. There's actually a really great article by the end of the semester. We're talking about different populations of students, and there's an article that talks about veteran students as already professionals, and that there's students who have gone into the military and obviously are going to school on the GI Bill, but they've already worked professional jobs, and a lot of the jobs in the military can be writing jobs and collaborative jobs. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of students, especially our reentry students, who've had a lot of practice with this. And Erin also talked about basic writing writers needing to see themselves as writers, and a lot of you got there with your posts as well, is thinking about that. How we, like, that's the pedagogy, is so that there's the theory, is how do we get basic writing, like Bernstein's there, and so is Shaughnessy, she wants teachers to dive in. We as teachers need to get to a place where basic writers are seeing themselves as writers. That's the theory. How do we get there in practice? And I think you guys had really good discussions about that. Let's see. So Dana had some really interesting things to say about small things she could do to incorporate collaborative writing. I think some of you have hesitations about incorporating big collaborative writing projects because it's such a buy-in on all the students, and it's hard to do in a class where there's community might be lacking, or levels might be lacking, or trust might be lacking, or just the knowing how to collaborate is lacking, because that's a skill. And so she talked about the collaboration that they're doing is having these conversations about checking in with each other's students. I think that's a really great way to bring collaboration into a classroom, is to do it in small bits. So, and Dana also said that she's overwhelmed with all the pedagogy because she has so many questions every time she reads. She asked, does it make sense to isolate basic writing students? Should they be mixed company with other students in place, such as the studio environment? How can we help students see themselves as readers and writers when they have heard the opposite their entire educational life? All great questions. And I hope that we get to answering some, this isn't this is the week that we're talking about basic writing. But I don't know that the isolationist, a lot of schools will put basic writers in their own classes, right? At my school, they do. They don't use, or at my university, they do. They don't use the ALP model. Basic writers just are basically, I wouldn't say, they're kind of punished. If you think about that, they're punished by having to take an extra semester of freshman comp. And my school doesn't have the model where that semester and then the pre-semester and the first semester can get combined into one. And that ends up being a big problem, because that's more time a student needs to take and more money on a class, right? For students who are already vulnerable. So there's a really big case that putting basic writers in their own classroom environment is detrimental to them. At the same time, there's research that says that giving these students the opportunity to practice more is really helpful. I don't know that there's a right, and I think like local context is really big. So that might be something to think about. What happens at a community college might be really different than what happens at a large scale university than what happens at a small liberal arts college. Ashley talked about collaborative writing, engaging in social writing when she has trust and comfort with people on a project. And when she teaches students about the importance of thinking and writing as a collective group, she would start with an icebreaker. That's a great idea because for sure you have to work together. Like sometimes too, if you're asking students to work on like a high stakes or collaborative project, it's good to wait until the end of the semester and do a bunch of like team building stuff early in the year. No shock to any of us. Businesses use this model. They're team building all year round. Austin has mixed feelings about teaching collaborative writing because he's not really sure that students get out of it what they could. And that's a valid critique. I think I do think that these ideas of scaffolding small collaborative projects are helpful. But then again, it doesn't always, like, local context is big. It doesn't always work in every single classroom. Some students want to work on it themselves. I'm going to out myself a little bit. I am taking my first policy class in our social work program. The reason I'm taking it is because it's with a sitting senator here. Our first project was due today, and it was a collaborative project, and it was hard to work with other people and to trust them. I was up half the night last night because I told them I'd edit the paper, and they all didn't get it in on time. And I don't know. I have to really think about this. I think I definitely learned how to work better with other people, and I can, and not that I've never worked with other people. I can learn more, but I was working with people who, I have a PhD. These students are master's students. They're all in their early to mid 20s, and they just aren't as professional as me. And I don't think I did as great of a job as listening and leading and thinking about the ways we can make our project better and we can make the collaborative model better. So that was me, and that's me reflecting on the process. Nobody's really completely talked about this. But just like the writing process, the collaborative process can also have built-in reflections for how everyone did. How did my group do? A lot of programs won't allow teachers to do collaborative projects. They say they have to be graded separately, which for all of us are like, because one of the really awesome things about collaborative projects is that instead of grading 20 papers to that unit, we can grade, 5 or 6. And, they might even be longer papers. So it gives students the opportunity to, write longer things. But a lot of programs won't let students. So a lot of what this teacher does is she or myself, I've done that before, is you grade the long project and you give all the group members the same grade. But because students have to, by policy wise, turn in their own projects, you give them a low stakes reflection and they reflect on the collaborative process. And that actually I find really fruitful. And if you build that into your curriculum too, like talking about collaboration. Michelle she says that her previous experience where I was left doing most of the writing and editing is a mistake of a mismatched group of members as an undergraduate. Yeah, I think I just experienced that. And I think some of us, to be fair, our hesitation on collaborative writing is that we don't want that to happen to our students. I don't, personally, pedagogically, I treat students like adults. I also don't like to manage the group project. And so what I like is to leave students on their own and the groups to, I tell them that I'm here for any big problems, but I want you guys to figure this out and figure out how to work with each other. So come to me if someone falls off the map and I need to like prod them via email. But I hate to have this. I hate for students to have the same experience that Michelle is talking about. Lori talks about how she's going to be diving in, helping students conceptualize writing as just another form of communication that they are capable of producing, practicing genre, comparing the varying registers of relations to the varying costumes in life, saying that there's nothing wrong with wearing sweatsuits, but wearing an appropriate sweatsuit to a formal meeting of the board of directors is inappropriate. So yeah, I thought that was a great metaphor, by the way. So, and I think that's a great way to put that to students. Andrew struggled this week to comprehend all of the hubbub. I thought Andrew had a really great, like, long, sustained post on what is this, like, politics in basic writing. And honestly, it's actually plagued our discipline since the beginning. So it's the Harvard, right? We read about the Harvard entrance exam, and all of a sudden, like, open admission, like, think about this in the history. So the elite used to just go to school, right? But then we got all these land-grant universities that have a less stringent admission process. But that means that the diversity of students is greater. They're not getting wealthy students anymore. They're getting students that are from all backgrounds. They're getting working class students. They're getting middle class students. And so that's really where all the hubbub comes, right? Our students flocked to our population flocked to the universities after the 2008 recession. And so I think that that's some of the hubbub again. Not that that's some of the hubbub again, is that our students flocked to the universities and the community colleges because they couldn't find jobs. And they were like, well, if I can't find jobs, then, I'm going to use my Pell Grant money, or I'm going to take out crazy student loans, and I'm going to make myself more viable in this economy. And some of the students there hadn't been back to college, hadn't been in a formal classroom in a really long time. And so we, like, the getting of diversity of writers. I will say that another hubbub comes from the attitude of teachers and professors in writing departments that I think somebody touched on it, might not be capable of teaching this population of students, or might not be equipped to. So, like, there is, teaching the population of basic writers, there should be some sort of training or professional development that somebody puts themselves to teach this population of students, or to teach a specific class, because it really, and unless you yourself, like, already get it, you put yourself in that mindset. But there is some support that you need there. And so there is hubbub, because that, how we have a range of professors, and we all have, like, pretty high specialized degrees, and some even don't understand the plight of first generation college students. I'm one, so I do. But my professors didn't understand that. And, so anyway, that's my long schlep at that. Let's see. Amy talks about smaller collaborative projects as opposed to big ones. And I think, again, yes. Allie said that one of the biggest issues she thinks in the basic writing program is the assessment, which decides if students should be enrolled or required to take the basic writing course. Yeah, that's definitely a big issue, is that there's not a standard assessment, and what are we assessing? And really, could those be assessed clearly, right? Anybody ever do? I know that I have been paid to score some of the state exams for high school. I don't feel equipped to do it, and I don't feel like it's fair at all. Like, and again, I don't teach high school, but I was paid to score. I think I have been kicked out of it because I don't get that model, the standardized testing model, and norming students based on their writing in an hour essay thing. And so how are we and the next one is to place students into their respective classes. One placement makes them have to take an extra college course, prolonging their time and money in that. That's tough. Ethan says that when he was a teaching assistant, he was assigned to grade students' essays with both content and conventions. I also was assigned a role as a grader, and I took orders from the teacher, and one of their orders was to make comments and give them a grammar grade. That's what they wanted me to do, and I was young enough and not knowledgeable enough of the field that I just went through with my red pen and I just gave students a grammar grade. It was in a 300 level Latin American film class, and the teacher was the major teacher graded on grammar. I think that I was actually just supposed to be a grader, but she decided she was going to grade the content and I was going to grade the grammar. And so I would grade the grammar. I felt it was very troubling, just like Ethan kind of now sees it very flawed. And maybe you didn't take orders from the major teacher, but I did. Christina talked about the hidden curriculum of basic writing as an institutional gatekeeping mechanism, and the politics of public funding and access to public education. And if you read Christina's whole post, she's had a lot of experience, and so I encourage you all, if you're interested in basic writing, or Andrew had problems I wouldn't say problems. Obviously, if you haven't taught basic writing, then problems aren't problems. They're just lack of experience. But he didn't quite understand the hubbub. But I think Christina's post kind of makes that apparent. So in discussion, let's see. Teaching, we need to teach people how to work in group. That's kind of a hidden syllabus, whether you're teaching basic writing or regular stuff. And we could bring, that's Susan Bernstein's point, is we need to bring some of these hidden syllabus stuff out in the front. This is how we work with a group. So it's when we talked about metacognition up in the first week as one of the frameworks for success in post-secondary writing, some of those things happen to be bringing sort of the hidden curriculum of the class out to front. This is how I'm going to grade this essay, right? And saying that so that the students don't feel like, what is happening here? Not every professor does. And students who come from vulnerable populations have had a professor who says nothing about any of those things and grades them down. I know that I had that happen to me a couple of times. Barriers outside of school impact student life. You guys talked about TAC. I love that you brought in your own collaborative writing experience. Also, managing the group of students. Sometimes it's helpful if you know, and it's a lot more work, is you know the students and you make sure you put them in the right group. But it takes you sitting down and really thinking about that. I can't remember who said that, but one of the hacks that they use for basic writing students is to have them write things down as they say them. And I don't think this is just a hack for basic writing students. It's maybe something that students haven't thought, that this population of students haven't thought about, but it's something that people use all the time. I use it, especially when I'm stuck. Building student motivation, and then Christina talks about the very different levels of developmental writing. So anyway, sorry I couldn't be super brief, but I guess I had a lot to say this week. Once again, great work. Sign up for your time frame, and yeah, I'm looking forward to the discussion next week. So have a great rest of your week, and I'll talk to you soon.